Hi everyone, my name is Shauna, in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. I am going to be doing my February wrap-up for 2023 in this video, but before I get into that, there's two things I need to say that are fairly important. First thing is, I have an appointment like really soon, so I need to film this video as quickly as I can, and I'm going to try and speak as clearly as possible, but if I'm rushing a little bit, that is why. The second thing is, my phone has been absolute crap recently, and I need to get a new phone. As you can see, whenever anything is on the lower half of my phone, or in this case the right half of my phone since my phone is sideways, it sort of gets like doubled. And also, I need to get a new phone because the audio keeps being really screwed up whenever I record anything on my phone. So I'm very sorry about that. I will be getting a new phone shortly, probably a iPhone 14 I want to say, but it could be a different one. But yeah, I'm going to be getting a new phone soon. So bear with me for right now for these sort of lower quality videos, and then we'll get back to good quality videos soon. So I read 9 books in February, and my average star rating was 3.22 stars. There was only one book that I truly disliked out of all the books that I read this month, which is very good. Normally I dislike a lot of books that I read, but I only disliked one, so I think that was pretty good. So without further ado, let's discuss these books. The first book that I read in the month of February was The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. This is the third and final book in the His Dark Materials series, and this helps me complete my goal for this year to finish the His Dark Materials series. I'm not going to be reading the novellas and short stories because Philip Pullman is unfortunately problematic and I don't want to support more of his works, and also because the second and third book in the His Dark Materials series are really boring. This one was like more interesting than The Subtle Knife because at least action happened, but it was still fairly boring. It's hard to describe this book series because it's so different from the first book. Like, the first book has a totally different vibe and it follows a totally different plot. So I will try and describe the first book, but know that the plot drastically changes. So the first book follows Lyra, and Lyra lives in this world in which everyone has a demon. A demon is basically your spirit in animal form. This demon has to be with you all the time, it's your animal companion, and in this world, Lyra is living at a college, a university, and she ends up going on an adventure with a mysterious Mrs. Coulter, but things don't go according to plan, and some dangerous things start to happen. So I really liked the first book in this series. The second book I didn't like, I gave it 2 stars. This one I'm giving 3 stars. My reasoning for giving this 3 stars is because I generally did sort of like some parts of it. There were some worlds they visited in here that I liked, and I liked that there was more action, and I really liked Dr. Mary Malone. She is my absolute favorite character in this entire series, and I found her analytical scientific brain to be so fascinating, and it provided such a nice contrast from all the fantasy elements of the story. However, there's 2 main issues with this book. First of all, I really don't care for any of the characters besides Dr. Mary Malone, and Mary is a very small character in this series. So, I didn't really care for any of the characters, so it was hard to get myself invested in the story, and I found that whenever there was action, I was just going along for the ride. I didn't really care who died. I didn't really care who won or anything, because I just had lost so much interest in this series because of how boring this book and the second book was. My other issue with this book that got a little annoying is the second and third book, a lot has to deal with wanting to kill God. And that really feels unnecessary. And it's not the path that Philip Pullman should have taken in this series. I mean, there's so many things he could have explored in this world, yet he decided to go on an anti-religion tangent. And now I do firmly believe you can enjoy stuff that preaches messages that you don't like, so it's totally okay to enjoy the series and be a Christian or be religious. This one in particular just felt so heavy on the religion elements, and they pretty much specified that it is like Christianity that it is referring to when it's talking about wanting to destroy religion. So I was getting a little frustrated because I was like, there's so much religious stuff you're just throwing in here, and it's so unnecessary, and the series could have been so much better if Philip Pullman had taken a different path. Also, there's some parts in here where I was like, why is this considered a kid's book? Like, I don't have all of the quotes like marked down. There was only one quote that I really marked down. I have it in my review, but like, there's graphic animal like torture or animal pain, murder, and I was like, why do we have this in a children's book again? And then I'm going to read off one quote. This quote is considered somewhat adult, but it's in a children's book, so you know? Anyways, this quote, I was like, oh my gosh, how was this in a children's book? This quote says, "She felt as soft and light in his arms as she had when Lyra was conceived 13 years before." What the frick? First of all, that's just a weird thing to say in general, and to have it in a children's book. Like, imagine a 10-year-old reading this book and then going to their parents and going, "I read this word in my book and I don't know what it means. Can you tell me what conceived means?" Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyways, yeah, this was a 3-star read because it was okay. I enjoyed parts of it, but overall I felt like it could have been a lot better. The next book that I read this month was a arc that I got off of NetGalley, and this arc is called I Am Ace, Advice on Living Your Best Asexual Life. It is by Cody Daigle-Oriens. This book is a nonfiction book that I found to be very informative and very helpful. I'm asexual, and so I related to a lot of Cody's experiences in the book, and I really liked how Cody includes stuff that both allosexual people need to learn. Allosexual people are people who are not asexual, so people who experience sexual attraction, and I appreciated how Cody also had tons and tons of stuff in here for people who are both exploring their sexuality and people who just are asexual but need some help with that. I, in particular, really found it helpful to have the different types of attraction defined really clearly. I found that to be really helpful. I think that is going to help everyone as they're exploring their sexuality. And then I also really appreciated how Cody had a whole section on, like, how to have a relationship when you are, like, not into sexual things. I found that to be very helpful and eye-opening, and I really liked his ideas that he had on how to pursue romantic relationships if you're asexual. I gave this one 4 stars. My reasoning for giving it 4 stars is just that it drags a little bit, and I feel like it was missing a little bit of stuff, but it was a very good book, and I highly recommend it to everyone, and I think it's perfect for anyone wanting to learn more about asexuality, whether you're someone who is new to your asexuality, or whether you're someone who isn't asexual but you want to know more about your asexual friends. And then the next book that I read is another arc, but this one is a physical arc. This one is The Jump by Brittany Morris. I am so grateful that I won a physical arc, and it put all the effort that I put into entering the giveaway, like, it made all that effort worth it, because they had this, like, scavenger hunt, Y'all Fest or Y'all West, which is where I win a lot of books. They had this, like, digital scavenger hunt, and I overthought it. I spent 30 freaking minutes searching their entire website, and then I finally figured out how to enter the giveaway, and I felt like a freaking idiot. So the reason why there was a scavenger hunt in order to enter the giveaway is because this book feature scavenger hunts. There is this group, and this group is named Jericho, and Jericho consists of these 4 teens right here. So they like to do scavenger hunts all around Seattle. However, they are struggling because an oil refinery is coming into their neighborhood, and it is going to impact them all negatively. It is going to disrupt jobs, it's going to disrupt homes. So this mysterious organization posts on the scavenger hunt, like, forum online, and says, "We have a scavenger hunt for you, and if you win the scavenger hunt, you're going to win power." And this mysterious organization is known as being a social justice group. So these 4 teens think, we will win the scavenger hunt, and after we win the scavenger hunt, then we will be able to use that power to stop the oil refinery from going into our neighborhood. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really fun. I recognized a lot of the Seattle locations because I go to Seattle a lot. I have relatives up there, and I go to Emerald City Comic Con every year. So I found it to be really enjoyable and fun, and I really loved all 4 of the main characters. I did think that this book should have been longer because it's fairly short, because there were, like, some topics shoved in there, like social justice topics. I don't know if that's the right word to call them social justice topics, but, like, real life important issues that are, like, sort of controversial, but you've got to discuss them and deal with them. There was, like, a bunch of those shoved in there, but I felt like if this book was longer, it could have fully, like, gone in depth onto all of those, but it felt like it skimmed over a lot of the details. Like, it tried to bring up, like, homelessness, but then it, like, skimmed over that topic. So I ended up giving it 4 stars just because it should have been longer to fully develop all of the topics that I wanted to hit on. But other than that, it's such a fantastic book. It is such a fun read. It's super quick to read, and I especially recommend it to anyone who likes puzzles and scavenger hunts, and I also recommend it to everyone who loves Seattle. I'm sorry if you hear my dog crying. I've talked about this before. She doesn't like to be alone, but if I let her into the room, my cats are going to be really pissed because my cats don't like her. The next book that I read off of Kindle Unlimited, and I filmed a reading vlog for this book. So my reading vlog for this book will be coming out shortly. This book is called Your Rhythm. It is the first book in the Sherbrooke Station series and is by Katia Rose. I love Katia Rose. She's one of my favorite authors, and almost all of her books are on Kindle Unlimited, so I'm slowly working through reading all of her books. Your Rhythm follows Kay, and Kay is a journalist, and her newspaper sends her out to interview the lead singer of this band. However, when she goes to meet up with the lead singer doesn't show up, and instead the drummer Matt shows up. So she interviews Matt, and she slowly starts to develop feelings for him, as you can guess. So it's a rock star romance between a drummer and a journalist. I liked this one. I found it to be really light and easy to read, and I really liked Kay as a character. However, I felt like it was missing like a lot of like oomph to make it like a good book. Like, it was just enjoyable, but it could have been a lot more deeper. And Katia's earlier books, and this is one of her earlier books, just aren't as good as her newer books. And so if you want to read a Katia Rose book, I recommend starting with like her newer ones. So like Catch and Cradle, Deborah Lewis Tartan, This Used to Be Easier, and Just Might Work. Girlfriend material, like I recommend starting with those ones as opposed to starting with her earlier ones. However, I still did enjoy Your Rhythm. It just felt like it could have been better, so I gave it 3 stars. And then I read my favorite book of the month, Tiger Honor by Yoon-Ha Lee. Tiger Honor is the second book in the Thousand World series, and this is part of the Rick Riordan's Presents imprint. Tiger Honor is such a phenomenal book. I found it to be really, really fun and enjoyable. So if you read the first book, Dragon Pearl, you might remember this character named Juan. And Juan has a nibbling. Nibbling is a gender-neutral term for a niece or nephew, and his nibbling, Sabine, is wanting to join the Space Forces. So Sabine goes ahead and gets accepted into the Space Forces. Sabine is going on their first flight in a spaceship when things go terribly wrong, and Sabine is put into a life or death situation. I freaking loved this book. I love Sabine as a main character. I found them to be very enjoyable, and I loved being in their head because they're really good at problem solving, and they're also really good about thinking through every option, and I loved just seeing inside their head and seeing their thought process. I also found all of the side characters to be absolutely phenomenal. I know that a lot of people don't like this one as much as Dragon Pearl, but I personally found that Dragon Pearl dragged in a couple spots, which Tiger Honor doesn't do that at all. It is action-packed from the very start, and it stays action-packed throughout the whole story. And I just loved it so much, and I cannot wait for the third book in the series. And I'm really hoping the third book in the series dives more into Celestials more, because I really want to know more about Celestials and their powers. So Tiger Honor was definitely a 5-star read for me. It is my second 5-star read of the year, and it definitely will be on my favorite of the year list. And then I read an arc from NetGalley, and this was If I Can Give You That by Michael Gray Bulla. If I Can Give You That is a very intense book, so please check the trigger warnings if you're planning on reading this book. If I Can Give You That follows Gale, and Gale is a trans boy, and he is a senior in high school, and Gale has a mom with a mental illness. It doesn't ever specify what the mental illness is, but I get the sense that it's probably major depressive disorder. His mom pretty much has a stable level of just depression all the time, but it can get a lot worse to the point where she needs hospitalization at points. It's just very extreme depression. So Gale is dealing with accepting his identity and figuring out who he is, and he's going on an adventure to figure out his romantic attractions and sexual identity. Well, Gale's friend convinces Gale to go to this meeting, Plus, which is for teens who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And at those meetings, Gale starts to befriend this guy named Declan, and a romance starts from there. This is a queer coming-of-age story, and I think that it did a lot of things good. My cat just moved my phone with her tail. It did a lot of things good in the sense that there was a lot of important topics that this covered, and I think it's important to have more queer coming-of-age stories, especially with trans main characters. I also really liked Declan as a character. I thought he was absolutely perfect, and I loved how he respected Gale and Gale's boundaries. However, I wasn't a super huge fan of Michael Gray Bulla's writing style. I found it to get really slow at parts. I don't necessarily want to know, what is happening on a day-to-day basis with these characters. I want to just have more, condense the highlights instead of, going, oh, we have to cover every single thing that they do at school. I also felt that there was a lot of plot lines, especially with the minor characters, that should have been developed more, but they weren't developed more. And this is another book, like The Jump, where I wouldn't mind if it had been longer, if it had fully dived into all of these, minor side characters more because like I wanted more out of the minor side characters. I just really did. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars because I did overall enjoy it, and I think there was a lot of good things to this book, and I think people should read this book especially because of how it gives insight into what life with a mentally ill parent is like, and it also gives insight into what the trans experience is like. But I did think I did have a lot of issues with this book, so I think it's an important book to read. Just don't go into it expecting it to be the most amazing book that you've ever read in your life. And then I read Whiteout, and Whiteout is a short story collection, and all the short stories are interconnected. It is by Danielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. So Whiteout is like Blackout, if you've read Blackout. So these 6 black women authors also wrote Blackout, in which there's a blackout in New York City, and it's about all these like romances that are happening during the blackout. This is a similar concept, except there's a whiteout. There is a snowstorm that hits Atlanta, and all of these characters start falling in love. The story that connects all of them is Stevie and Sola. Stevie had a bad breakup with Sola, and Stevie's trying to win Sola back, and all of the other short stories are about doing something to get Stevie and Sola back together. So for example, like one of the characters goes to a mall to get a certain Lego kit for Sola to try and help Stevie win Sola back. But it's all taking place during a big snowstorm. There was only one story that I truly enjoyed in this book, and that was Ava and Mason's story, which is the final short story in here before Stevie and Sola's story wraps up. All the other ones felt very mediocre and felt very lackluster. I didn't feel like most of the stories were very deep or anything like that. If I were to summarize like my favorite thing about all of these stories in general, like besides Ava and Mason's story, because I loved everything about that, I would generally say I liked all the locations. I thought it was really cool how they got so creative with the different locations. But besides the locations, I found this book to be just very meh. Like, it's one that you can easily skip, and Blackout is a lot better, and I find that with most short story collections, I'm gonna end up giving them like 3 or 4 stars, sometimes 2 stars, because just, I feel like there's so many short stories that should be full novels to fully give them the depth and the time that needs to fully develop each character. So this was a 3-star read for me. And then I read a novella, which is called The Lady and the Rabbit, and it is by Laura Greenwood. This is a paranormal shifter romance that is also historical. Like, imagine like Pride and Prejudice era, like dating and courting, like it's sort of like that, except for there's shifters in there. This is a novella and it's part of a series, but it can be read as a standalone. Unfortunately, this is the one book that I didn't like this month. The Lady and the Rabbit was very uber formal, like it went over the top trying to be formal and polite with everything that it said, to the point where it felt like I was reading a college essay as opposed to reading a fully well-developed story. There wasn't a main conflict to keep this story going, so it was hard to get myself invested in the story because I felt like there was no stakes. They tried to be like, oh, we can't be together because we're not the same type of shifter, but then everyone accepted their marriage right away, and there was actually no problems to their marriage, so there really wasn't a conflict at all. And I also felt like there wasn't any chemistry or connection between the 2 main characters. Oh, and I should also say the plot just follows Denise, and Denise is a fox shifter, and she's falling in love with a rabbit shifter, and she doesn't like this whole like courting and balls thing. She likes reading, and that's like her favorite thing to do. But yeah, I didn't really like The Lady and the Rabbit, and I'm surprised that The Lady and the Rabbit has so many positive reviews, because it's not that fantastic. Most of the reviews are like 4 and 5 stars raving about how amazing it is. I don't understand. And then the final book that I read this month, and I actually have filmed this video twice because I wasn't expecting to finish a book on February 28th, but I did. This book is Get a Clue. This is the 4th book in the Bookish Boyfriend series. This is by Tiffany Schmidt. I won this one in a giveaway a while ago, so I haven't read the previous 3 books in the series, but honestly, like, you don't need to read the previous 3 books in the series to understand this one. Get a Clue is from the point of view of Huck, and Huck is new to the school, Hero High, and Huck is falling in love with his mentor's brother, Win. But someone is trying to sabotage Win's chances of getting into Hero High because Win wants to transfer there. And Huck decides that he is going to solve this mystery and figure out who's trying to sabotage Win's chance of getting accepted. So it's a mystery, and as you can see here, it says the complete works of Sherlock Holmes, so it does involve a lot of like Sherlock Holmes type things, but it's also queer romance. So I liked the romance, and I found the mystery to be interesting. It kept me on my toes, and I was really interested in that. But the rest of the story was not fantastic. I didn't like the parents in the story, specifically Win's parents and Huck's parents just really got on my nerves. I found that most of the side characters really need to be developed more because Pretty much all of the characters except Wind had a very bland personality. I really didn't like how Huck was observing like every little detail. I'm like, you don't need to give us that much detail about your life. I hated how characters overanalyzed things and read too deeply into things when you don't need to read too deeply into things. And I also found all of the Sherlock Holmes mentions to be very forced. So the mystery and the romance builds up the plot of the story, and all the other things I mentioned I didn't like fills in the rest of the details. So I liked the plot, but everything else was not that fantastic. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars because I liked the plot, just the rest of the story needed to be better. Wow, okay, I finished this video before my appointment. That is good. That is very good. Okay, so those were all of the 9 books that I read in the month of February. I hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. As I said earlier in this video, my reading vlog for Your Rhythm will be releasing very shortly on my YouTube channel. I also have all of my other social media linked down in the description below in case you want to follow me on different social media platforms. I hope all of you had a great February. I hope all of you read some good books, and I hope your March is just as good, if not better, than your February. Until next time, goodbye.